why don't we just get rolling in terms of what we need to know in the next week and a half and on race day. So again, the New York City Tri, it's for the 2014. We have new race sponsors, which is Lifetime Fitness, which is great partnership. It's on August 3rd, as you well know. It's an Olympic distance, if you didn't already hear about that, and a 1.5-kilometer swim, a 40-kilometer bike, and a 10-kilometer run. And the interesting thing is that this is really an endurance event. You know, we're looking at the average finish time for this race of about 3 to 4 hours. So this is not something that normally you can do kind of often, as we say, OTC, off the couch, something that you have to train for. And hopefully, now with a week and a half to go, you are ready for that. The good thing about this course is that it's a closed course, so that there will not be cars, there will not be traffic. There will be New York City pedestrians as you run around Central Park that probably don't care too much about your race as they walk their dogs and their baby strollers. But it really is a closed course, and it's a very safe course. And the organizers to this race have gone through great lengths to make and ensure their safety this year. Amazingly so, there's about 4,500 people who have signed up this year. This is much larger than in years past, which I think is exciting. And there's a huge number of volunteers that are dedicated towards your race. There's approximately 1,200. That might vary a few here and there. But there's a great number of people out there who are specifically there for you and for your needs. And part of what I bring to this is about 80 healthcare professionals that will be there to help ensure your safety at the swim, during the bike, and at the run, as well as at the finish line. The nutrition on the course, if you don't already know, is Cliff Shots and Gatorade. Obviously, if you have your own needs, you're going to have to carry that yourself, and we can talk about that a little bit later. The goals of this webinar are to talk about some training. We're talking really about the taper week. Some aspects of injuries, if God forbid anybody has something that they need to deal with, and some of the race logistics, and obviously, as I said, question and answers, which we'll get to a little bit later. So what do you need to know? Well, obviously, it's one race, but it's 3 separate events, and that's obviously the great thing about triathlon, but you got to be prepared for all of them. You've really got about 12 days left in all of this, but I think the big take-home message that I was once taught many, many years ago in the beginning of my training was be prepared to change your plan. We're talking about a 3 to 4 hour race. Granted, for the pros, it's a little bit under 2 hours. For some people, it's going to be over 4 hours. So whatever you've planned, whatever you've thought about, which hopefully you've done that, be prepared because something could potentially happen, whether it's a water bottle that jumps out of your water bottle case, whether it's you drop something, whether you've developed a blister, something along the line is going to happen. So be prepared for that and understand that it is an endurance event, and there's always time to make up for it, and there's always people there to help you. So know that if it does change, it's not the end of your day. This is just another battle that you have to fight, whether it's physical wear and tear or something that I talked about 2 seconds ago. It's something that you will hopefully just be able to accommodate and get through and finish your race, and we'll be there waiting for you at the finish line. The other big lesson that I learned is control what you can. I used to worry so much about the weather. It's something that you have no control over. You have to understand that the only time that there's any aspect of the race that really gets canceled is if there's thunder and lightning with respect to the swim. And with the heat index, which is some type of calculation that's done, race morning, we're above a certain level that it might turn into more of an untimed event. But again, in the years that we've participated in this, that's never really happened. So again, I think you have to understand, and we'll talk about some of those things, control what you can. Things that you can't control, try not to worry about that stuff. In terms of the taper period, this is something that you really can control. This is the time where you rest and recover. Your training's done. It should be in the logbook, and you really don't have much more training to do. This is the time that you need to kind of gain all of that energy that you've built and allow the body to kind of register that and get ready for race day. So it's really important that you abide by taper. Everybody's different. If you have a training plan, if you have a coach, follow that plan. Don't think that you're going to cram another workout in and it's going to make any damn bit of difference in your race results, because it really won't. The aerobic engine is built. You can't build it anymore. All you can do is actually hurt yourself. So this is the time that we tone down the volume. Some intensity is maintained because you want to be prepared for race day, but really volume should come down and take some ample days to actually rest. In terms of hydration, well, obviously this is, New York City, hot, sweltering summer. Walking around the city today, you'll lose a liter of water. So over the next few days, it's really good to stay hydrated. Walk around with a water bottle, Gatorade, whatever you're going to take in, this is the time to do that. Similarly, with nutrition, it's very important that you don't try anything new on race day. If you've never had a cliff shot, well, then don't be prepared to take a cliff shot, at the run transition or the first run aid station. Don't be prepared to try something new. You want to stay with the same foods that you've been eating. You don't want to upset your stomach. Some people have lots of gastrointestinal problems in an endurance event, and this is something that hopefully you've been training for and preparing your body. Certainly nutrition, the night before the race, I tend not to eat a great deal of amount of food because obviously transit time in your belly is probably 12 to 16 hours. So you can imagine if you have got a really big dinner the night before, you're going to be the first resident in the Porta-Johns, and that's not a place that you want to spend a good amount of time before the race. So think about 2 days beforehand, having your most tremendous meals, if that's what you want to do, and really the night before, eat something light and healthy. In terms of equipment, similarly, you want to make sure that you've tried everything, and this is a great time to do that. In that taper period where you're not really worried about the workouts, but if you want to use the outfit that you're going to race on in the day, go and try that out. If you want to try something a little bit new, well, this is a time period that you can. But I would get prepared that everything that you do over the next week is how you're going to do it in race day. This will help you physically as well as help you mentally during that time. I think in terms of visualization, this is something that almost every pro athlete and every elite athlete does, is that they think about every step of the race, what they're going to do in their head, and they go over that each and every day, if not more than that. And this helps you mentally prepare for the race so you can visualize this. If you've done the race before, that's easy to do. If you haven't, well, you could take a drive up the Henry Hudson, up the Mosholu, turn around, and come back and kind of see what the bike course is like. You can't really swim, but you can certainly walk the Hudson and see that it's a very protected area. And then by all means, the swim, as we can talk about in a sec, is probably the fastest swim you'll ever do. And it's probably the easiest swim you'll ever do. Despite some of the precautions of being in the Hudson, it's really not a bad place to swim. I think the other thing in terms of the run, you could certainly go and run the course or get an idea, or bike the course if you didn't really want to do that. But that's a great way to get an idea of what you're to anticipate. And I think all those race plans it's really very helpful to do that. I think the next big thing in this taper period is also think about what you're going to do after the race. I think there's often these highs and lows. Well, I just finished the race, and now what do I do? You don't want to get stuck in that kind of blues time, post-race blues of where, gee, I got nothing on the schedule. What am I going to do? I think plan for that and know how you're going to go about a recovery period after the race, so that you don't sustain an overuse injury, which is what we'll talk about in a little bit. So I think post-race plan is extremely important. So what happens if you're injured right now? I think that's the big thing, at least from my perspective as being an orthopedic surgeon and someone who's actually lived through a good number of overuse injuries. Obviously in triathlon, I guess, from a bike perspective, you can fall, you can break your wrist, you can break your collarbone, but mostly what I see is a treating orthopedic surgeon or overuse injuries. And why is that? Well, as I always like to say, injuries are really not an act of God. This is something that you've done to yourself. It often indicates that you yourself, the athlete, has reached a breakdown point. Our tissues of the body, muscles, tendons, ligaments, fascia, or really any soft tissue from the skin, down deep, is made up of collagen. Collagen makes up 70% of our dry weight. Obviously, most of our body content is water. Think about collagen as a rope. It is a fibrous type structure that's really good at stretching, or what we call tensile loading. But obviously, when we run, when we walk, when we go up and down stairs, when we bike, when we lift weights, we put some normal stress to that tissue. Well, what's really good is that our body responds to that, and it responds in a good way. It builds tissue. That's why we build muscle. It builds stronger bones. So it's all very good. But what happens is when you have repetitive stress that exceeds some threshold where the body can't normally respond to it, it leads you into an abnormal healing response where you develop scar tissue or abnormal tissue. And it's at that point that these microscopic injuries become symptomatic. And you say, oh my God, my knee hurts, my shoulder hurts, my back hurts. You know, a variety of complaints. There's not one obvious injury. It just all of a sudden starts to happen. The good thing about this is that all injuries are really curable if they're caught early. And I think that's the take-home message, is that, you know, sometimes we have discomfort and we kind of run through that, and sometimes we try and push too hard, and that's really a red flag. So for me, injury recognition is everything. All patients are bad patients, including myself. We have a desire to push through. That's the obsessive-compulsive nature of triathletes. And there's really no obvious signs of injury. You know, no one fell. No, I don't see any bruising. I don't really see any swelling, but it just hurts. So as I alluded to, there is some good pain and there's some bad pain. So if you're suffering from something right now and you say, well, you know what, when I start to run, my knee aches a little bit, but by the time I get into mile 2, mile 3, you know, it doesn't really bother me, I think that's manageable. I think there's no great red flag that you have to worry about. It's obviously something that you should pay attention to, but it's not something that's imminent that's going to stop you from racing. The bad pain is when you do an activity and with every single stroke, every single step, every single revolution of the bike, or putting yourself in the aero bars, that it persistently hurts. That's problematic, and that's something that you really need to, you know, take hold of and ask someone about. Experience and maturity are really our best friends. You know, after umpteen numbers of years of racing, I finally can, you know, be mature and say, oh, something's wrong and I need to take care of it. But you have to be very good with that respect. So take positive actions. You know, my old partners, my senior partners would say, if it hurts, don't do it. That's not something that any triathlete really wants to hear. We often talk about modifying activity. And through this taper period, if something's achy, something's a little sore, try to find something else that doesn't seem to bother it. Again, like I said to you, your engine has been designed and modified, and it's not going to change very much in the last week and a half of training. So what you want to do is just stay active so your brain doesn't go crazy, but try and find something, you know, whether it's an elliptical trainer, whether it's decreased resistance, you know, on an indoor bike, something that makes it not hurt. The other thing you have to do is learn by this and review your logbook if you happen to have one. And this is the best training tool ever, is if you've got a logbook and you can look back and say, well, you know, gee, there was a bump up in my schedule. And, you know, you try not to make that same mistake. If there are problems and you can't seem to get through them, obviously, you know, in the last week and a half, we can put some Band-Aids on you. But ask for advice because you're really not alone. There's someone else out there who's actually, you know, got something similar going on with them. So I always say treat the cause and not the effect. You know, we often talk about the acronym rest, ice, compression, elevation. Well, that's fine in an acute injury. For me, it's the relative rest. Look, go out and do something else. Try and find an activity that doesn't hurt. Ice is always very helpful. If there's any pain, ice 10 to 15 minutes, you know, every 2 to 3 hours can be very helpful. The philosophy of ice followed by heat, followed by ice, followed by heat, that modulation of temperature has never really been shown to be beneficial. Symptomatically, it might help you, but I don't think that there's any real science behind that. Compression can always be helpful in terms of if there is swelling. And elevation, obviously, if there's swelling, but I don't think if you don't see any swelling, then elevation is really not a component to it. Equipment issues, I alluded to this before, nothing new on race day. If you're going to try something, it better be tomorrow or the next day. But obviously, I would kind of stick with what you're doing. If there is a little tweak that you need to make in bike fit, I mean, you can try and do that. But again, I think you want to stick with what you've been working on. Obviously, the training program, you're in your taper mode and stick to it. Often people will feel a little sluggish in taper mode, and that's just your way your body is working. And usually by the time race day comes and the emotions and the adrenaline starts to pump, that kind of sluggish feeling in your legs and your arms will quickly go away. Dietary considerations, this is not the time to pig out. Obviously, it is a time to maintain your caloric intake. Your body is revved up. Your body's ready to go. But you want to kind of maintain where you've been throughout this whole training cycle. I'm not a huge fan of supplements. I don't think you need to implement anything into this. Some people will ask about salt supplementation. Again, this is one of those things, if you've not done it, I would not do that, race day. Can you preload some salt in? Yeah, you can. But again, I think you have to be careful if you have any medical conditions from high blood pressure or any renal disease. I think you have to be very careful with that. But I wouldn't, if your buddy says, hey, salt, it's great, you should take one pill every 2 hours, don't do that unless you've really tried it. Salt in capsule form can be very irritating to the stomach. And if you've ever seen people in endurance events, vomiting is one of those big things. And salt loading can actually cause that. From a recovery standpoint, again, post-race, you should think about it. But certainly through this period of time, this is a great mental break. You're not forced into huge workouts. So I think it's really very good, and this often helps with immune function, because obviously after races like this, people do get upper respiratory illnesses. I think if you're suffering from an upper respiratory illness right now, well, it's actually a good time, because you've got 2 weeks or 10 days to get better, so take care of yourself. In terms of sleep, the night before race, there are many races that I've never slept the night before, and it's not affected my race performance. You're nervous, you're anxious. It's a normal thing. I wouldn't say have a beer the night before, a glass of wine the night before. If you've never done it, I would not do it, because it could certainly affect your stomach, and certainly could affect, kind of that pre-race morning jitters. I think 2 nights before is really, if you wanted to have a beer or two and get a good night's sleep, that's really the time to do it. So some of the race logistics. Again, it's a 1.5-kilometer swim. Again, this is the fastest swim that you will ever do. There's no reason to panic about this swim whatsoever. It is a time trial start, so that people will just be kind of rolling in. It's not really a mass start. If you want to let your little wave go in, well, let them go in, and then let go of the pontoon. The only people that will dive in are the professionals and the elites. The rest will be hanging on and just kind of jump in. So you don't have to worry about that. Wetsuits. I think the big thing about the wetsuit is that from the transition area, which is down at 79th Street, to the start of the swim is obviously a 1.5-kilometer walk. It's a long way. Please do not put on your wetsuit until you get up to race start. I've seen many people do that in that mile and a half. They have become acutely dehydrated, and it's very problematic. So you have plenty of time to get that wetsuit on by the time you get to the start. Obviously, if you're running late, that's a problem. You might have to run up to the start, but try and leave yourself a good enough amount of time. Think about it's probably a good 20 to 25-minute walk from transition area, so plan that appropriately. Again, from a wetsuit perspective, if you haven't been in one, you should really try and get into a pool with one. Along those lines, lubrication is key. In the old days, we used to use PAM as a lubricant to help you get the suit off and to decrease friction. Now I would not advise using PAM. I would use any one of the lubricants that are out on the market, and I would lube more than you could possibly imagine. Around the neck, in the armpit, in the groin, around the chest. Anywhere that you could think that there might be some friction, it's worth it to lube. It'll make a huge difference for you. There is a clothing drop at the top of the at the swim start. So please walk with shoes so that although the course that pathway is nice and clean now as opposed to years past, there still could be glass or something that's along the line. And I can tell you, we have, have people not race because they've cut their foot on the way up there. So please be careful. We try and pick up all that we can, but we can't, assure you that there's not going to be something sharp that's around there. There are ample porta-johns. Always a suggestion is bring your own toilet paper. If you don't use it all, well, then you leave it for someone else, and good karma comes back to you. But there are ample porta-johns at the top. This gives a representation of the swim start that's up there. The 99th Street parking lot, which is obviously closed to cars, will have all of the porta-johns. There are a variety of aid stations. There will be a medical team that's up there. We'll have a medical team at swim exit. So if there's any problems from our perspective or your perspective needing us, we will be there and able to help you. The bike, again, as you will come down and exit out of the water, which is incredibly well marked. It's incredibly well contained. There are numerous kayaks. There are people that are on the shore watching you, making sure that there's no problems. There are boats. There are jet skis. So there's ample help in that water. But again, I could tell you that if you're at all nervous about swimming, just let the current take you down. You'll still have one of the fastest swims you could possibly imagine. When you get out of the water, it's somewhat of a long walk / run to the transition area. The red transition area is first. Yellow is second. There will be medical people along the way if there are problems, and you'll get into transition. The first and foremost thing that you need to do in transition, if you've never raced like this before, is put your helmet on. The number one reason for disqualifications is not wearing a helmet or not having it buckled. It's a huge safety issue, and you need to have that on. If you've not raced this course, you go from the promenade level up to the road surface, and we're going to go slow. There's no racing from the bike exit until you get to the top of the roundabout circle and onto the Henry Hudson. So please, the crowded area, the road surface is as best as New York City can provide to us. But there's also an incredibly steep upgrade from the promenade level to the circle. Please make sure in transition area that in the front ring, you are in the small ring, and on the back cog set, you are in the biggest ring. That will assure that you don't tip over on that very steep climb and fall and hurt yourself on that initial bike ride out. Again, people will be cautioning you about going slow. There's some sharp turns, but get the gearing correct. In the front ring, it should be small ring in the front and big ring on the back. The course terrain, which I'll show you in this next slide, again, if you've not seen this course, it's worth it to get into a car, a cab, or however you're going to get there, and take a ride. For the first few miles, it's relatively flat as you ascend up towards the bridge, and then it starts to get hilly. As you pass through the toll booths and go along the Henry Hudson, it is a very hilly ride as you will then go towards what's called the Mosholu Parkway, which is a fairly good ascent up and then a turnaround at the top and an ascent down, and then coming back down the Henry Hudson along the West Side Highway down to 57th Street, where there'll be a turnaround, and then back up to 79th Street and then back into the transition areas. And again, as you exit off of the off of the West Side Highway, we will be cautioning you to go slow around the traffic circle and down a very steep embankment to red transition and to yellow transition. There are hay bales that are there, and we will, again, caution you to slow down. We've had people fall in that region. It's a little crazy with all the people who are exiting and entering. So please take caution. This is not where the race is won or lost by any stretch of the imagination. Again, on the bike course, there are no aid stations. So for 40 kilometers, however long that takes you, you need to have your nutrition, your hydration on your bike. So please be prepared for that. The road surface on the northbound Henry Hudson, which is where you will be riding both north and south, is in fairly good shape. I've been on there recently. There are some potholes, so just please be careful, and hopefully as long as there's no rain, we should have a fairly dry course. The run Again, it's a 10-kilometer run as you transition out of red and yellow. Yellow has a little bit of advantage. They had a longer run from the swim to the yellow, but they've actually got a shorter run out on the rest of the course. So everybody is equal. There will be 5 aid stations along the run, which will provide both cliff shots at the first run aid station, which is as you enter into Central Park, and there'll be Gatorade at all of them. The course terrain is very hilly. If you've not run the Central Park Loop, it is a very hilly run. As you go across 72nd Street, relatively flat, enter the park, and as you go northbound, it's a set of rolling hills all the way up to 110th Street, which is a fairly prominent hill. As you go around the top, where there are those aid stations, you'll come across a spray station. And again, the east side is somewhat flatter, but as you come around what's called Cat Hill, going down towards 72nd Street, it's a good downhill and a turn uphill towards the finish line. It's a great run course. Please make sure that you hydrate through this. Depending on the temperature, our biggest problem that we see at the finish line is dehydration. And you can really avoid a trip to the med tent. We'd love to have you, but we'd rather that we don't, and that you do your hydration, you come across the finish line, and everybody's very happy. So in terms of race safety, these are some big points here, and then I think we'll leave it up to some question and answers. So if you have any questions, start typing them in, and Alexa will hopefully give me some of those, and I can try and answer them for you. But obviously, be prepared. Hopefully, you put in a lot of work through this training period. Mentally visualize what you're about to do. Be prepared to change it. Hopefully, you won't have to. Have a great time because it's a lot of fun and it's great support that's out there. Think about the nutrition on race day. It's a 3 to 4 hour race, so you've got to get in hydration. Obviously, you can't drink, and you don't want to drink any of that Hudson River water. But once you get on that bike, it's time to start drinking and start eating. Everybody has their amount of calories that they can take in. I would suggest probably not more than 300 calories per hour. That's an awful lot, but it obviously depends on the size of the individual. Hydration should be anywhere from about 20 ounces to 30 ounces of fluid an hour as you're getting on the bike. It depends on how hot it is. It depends on your sweat rate, and hopefully you somewhat figure that out. The day before the activity, it would be great. We would love to see you at the expo. Obviously, you're going to have to be there either Friday or Saturday. We have a medical booth, so if there's any last-minute questions that I can help you with, I'd be more than happy to answer any of the questions. But take it easy. Get your legs up. Don't do a lot the day before the race. Bike gearing, we talked about in transition. This is really important to remember. Helmet first, and obviously you got to dismount off the bike when you come off of it and be safe. Remember, you're potentially going to be in cleats. They're slippery, so go slow. We don't want any falls as you come out. The other thing that's a really, really important point is that you have chips on. If you happen to decide that you are not going to finish the race, please give your chip to an official that has a radio. If we have a racer that's not accounted for, the first place that we look is in the water. That requires an extensive amount of staff and resources, and we'd rather not have to do that. So please, if somewhere on the run or on the bike you say, I've had it, I'm done, please find a race official, give them the chip back so they know to call your number in and we can account for you. If you have a problem, again, medical tents, the medical volunteers will have on a red shirt. Medical tents will obviously appropriately have red tents with a cross on them. So look for us, and hopefully we can help you. Hopefully you don't need us. The other thing, too, is you've got families who have supported you through all of this. Please show them some appreciation. I know my wife, who feels like a widow, as many other significant others do at some of these races. Please show them some support because without them, you can't do this stuff. So I think from my perspective, I'll leave it up to you guys. If you have any questions, I wish you the best of luck. I'm there to help, along with my 80 other volunteers. So if there's any other questions or any questions, I wanted to text those to Alexa via the chat function, and I'll try and answer those for you.
Great. Well, we will start with our first question that we have regarding tapering for the race. Mark, if you could give your best advice on how our athletes can taper as they prepare for the triathlon, that would be great.
Again, I think you have to look at volume and intensity. Intensity is always good to keep up. So if you've done a speed workout, you've done a tempo workout, I would certainly maintain that, but I would probably cut your volume down this week, to about 50% of what you did the week before, and we're just talking volume-wise. And then maybe the following week I'd go to 25% of that volume. You can vary that a little bit here and there, but the volume is what hurts. That's what takes a lot out of you. To do intensity, short intensity, that just kind of keeps you, going and keeps all of the tissues ready to race. So I like to maintain intensity. I just like to decrease the volume.
Great. We have a couple other questions that are more race-specific that I can kind of help out on. We have questions about whether you can wear water socks on the swim, and the answer to that question is yes, you may. However, no sort of flippers or anything like that can give you that forward motion that would give you an advantage over other athletes. And then also with regards to leaving shoes at the swim exit, you're welcome to leave those, but it's sort of hit or miss if they're still going to be there once you get back from the swim. What's best if you do have some spectators there for you at the race, they can carry your shoes along the seawall and leave them for you at the swim exit. One other one we had was also regarding the Gatorade flavors, just a quick one. We are going to have lemon lime Gatorade flavors at all aid stations on the course. And the best strategy to walk from transition to swim start is just simply walking up the side of the swim wall right there, and then leaving your shoes with your clothing bag, which will be right at the swim start. And then, Mark, if you have any advice on how athletes can adjust back to their normal eating schedules, whether that be incorporating alcohol back into their schedule or supplementing some of their bigger meals as they finish the race.
Again, I think what's really important from a race recovery standpoint is, after your race, you have to think about what your caloric expenditure is from that race. It's probably, again, depending on hours, you're talking anywhere from 3,000, plus calories. I would think about in that day and through the next morning is to get those calories back. I think that's what's really important. I think there's going to be obviously food. We will have Gatorade at the finish line, and maybe Alexa, you can address any other food products that are in the family waiting area. What's there for them? There's bagels. What else is there?
Yeah, exactly. We'll have your typical bananas, and I don't think that we're going to be having oranges this year, but there will be bagels and bananas there for them at the race.
So I think the most important thing besides getting the calories in is getting fluids in. As good as anybody thinks they could conceivably be during the race about hydrating, you're always somewhat behind. So, getting through the finish line, going to the family area, start drinking and drinking and drinking and just getting fluids in. One, if you feel nauseous, it's because you're dehydrated. If you feel weak, it's because you're dehydrated. Cooling your body down. We will have wet towels for you at the finish line. They're cold. They will feel great. You want to get your body temperatures down. But again, I think, the caloric expenditure of that race is again, greater than 3,000 calories. And the next day or so, you want to get those calories back. Then obviously, it depends on your workouts. I mean, I wouldn't become a gluttonous pig in that week after the race, because for sure, you'll see your body fluctuate in terms of weight. And I've seen that on myself. I've gained, one race, I was incredibly dehydrated. I got 4 liters of IV, and I went from 141 pounds to 157 pounds, 2 days later because I ate like a gluttonous pig. and it just was not a healthy way to do things. So you just have to be careful with that. But certainly the week after the race, you can slowly increase your meal intake and start to think about some lower impact exercise. I don't know if I would necessarily go and run in a day or two. I might get on a spin bike and do some easy spin. Might get in the water, do an easy swim. But you want to let your body recover it, from a physical standpoint. You've expended yourself, you've raced. Your body deserves that recovery. So get the calories in, hydrate, and then slowly within a week to 2 weeks, think about starting to get back to some normal workout routines.
Great. We have a few questions here regarding the water temperature, and I'll address those real quickly. We have seen an average temperature of about 76 degrees when we have our athletes jump in the Hudson. With regards to the wetsuits, wetsuits are only permitted if the water drops below 78 degrees. So for the past few years, we have been wetsuit legal, but that is something that you will definitely know on race morning. So it works to just be prepared in that regard. And then also with regards to the bike course, someone had asked if we have what the protocol would be if there was a bike flat or whatnot. We actually have bike mechanics that are going to be up and down the course, and we also have bike mechanics that are going to be helping out in transition as well. So if you do have any issues with that, you will be able to have people on site to help you. And I'm looking to see, I don't know if we have any other questions anyone wants to throw in there right now. But I think we might be it.
Okay. Well, I thank everybody for taking the time out on this evening. Hopefully I gave you some tidbits, and I hope you have a great race. I think it's going to be a great day. It will be hot. It will be stinky, without a doubt. That's par for August in New York City. But again, we've got a great medical team that's ready, willing, and able to help you through this. So just stick with your race plan, and I think you should have a great day. So good luck, everybody.